Hello and welcome to today's Make a Difference webinar, which is very kindly sponsored by Westfield Health. My name's Claire Farrow. I'm the Global Head of Content for Make a Difference Media, and I also look after the content for our annual Mad World Summit, which is coming up in October, and also for the water cooler event, which is in April. Today's webinar is called Getting Started and Winning with Workplace Wellbeing, Finding Out What Works for Your People. We're delighted to be joined by two fantastic speakers who both work for award-winning organisations. So we've got David Capper, who's Chief Executive of Westfield Health, who the winners of Investor in People's Employer of the Year Gold 250 Plus Award. I guess that's for employers with more than 250 employees, yeah. And Anne-Marie Lister, who's Chief People Officer with Atom Bank, and Atom Bank were the winners of our own Make a Difference award for the employer with less than 500 employees that's made the most difference to workplace mental health and wellbeing over the past year. So really, really fantastic to have two great spokespeople with us. And I'm delighted to say we've got nearly 1,000 people registered for today's webinar, which is amazing to see. So really welcome everybody. It's great to have so many of you here. Good morning, Sophie says in the chat. And yeah, that reminds me, we love our webinars to be as interactive as possible. So please join in the chat, share your ideas and your experiences with one another. People get a lot from the chat as well as from listening to our speakers. I just say though, if you're a supplier, please don't use the opportunity to pitch in the chat. That's not what it's for. It's really for employers to share ideas and experiences around, you know, their challenges and solutions that they found when it comes to implementing workplace mental health and wellbeing solutions. So I should also mention that the webinar is being recorded, and you will be sent a link to the recording the day after the webinar, and we can also send you the transcript of the webinar. So you don't need to worry about that. You will be sent the recording of the webinar. Okay, just before we get started, I wanted to do a little warm-up poll because we really like to try and understand where our audience is coming from before we start talking to you. So thank you, Laura. Laura's just launched the poll. We've devised it's a three-part poll today. So first of all, we wanted to just get a sense of the kind of the size of the organisations that are with us today in the audience. So how many employees does your organisation have? Less than 250, 250 to 500, 500 to 1,000, or 1,000 plus. And then the second question, because we have said this is kind of about getting started, but it's also for people who are a little bit further along in the journey and maybe want to improve what they're doing. So we'd like to just understand how many of you getting started, how many of you are kind of part way along the journey with this, with workplace wellbeing. So where is your organisation on its journey to supporting employee wellbeing? We're working out how to get started. We have a few initiatives in place, but feel that something is missing. We already have a comprehensive employee wellbeing support in place, but recognise that there's more that we could be doing, or other. And you know, feel free to elaborate in the chat when you come to that. And the third question, because we're going to be talking a bit about the 4-day week, I'd love to know, do you think that the 4-day week could work for your organisation? Yes, no, or not sure? Okay, so we've still got people coming in to the webinar, 290 now, 291, lots of people joining. Hopefully you've had a moment to answer those questions. Morning from Warwick, morning from London, lots of hellos coming through. Nice to see you all. Okay, Laura, shall we see the results, please? Right, let's have a look here. Okay, so we've got 54% of you are from organisations with less than 250 employees, and 26% are from organisations with more than 1,000. So that's really interesting to see. We've got the full range there, Anne-Marie and Dave. I think we're going to be talking to, so we need to make sure that we're really responding to everybody's information needs. But that's really helpful to see, thank you. And where is your organisation on its journey to supporting employee wellbeing? So we've got about 15% of you are getting started. 43% have a few initiatives in place but feel that something's not quite right. And 40% have got comprehensive employee wellbeing programs in place, but recognise there's more to be done. So that's really, really interesting to see. And I would say that kind of is reflective of where lots of organisations are up to at the moment. I don't know if you'd agree, Dave, with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'd say that's what we're generally seeing across the board. And then, final question, do you think that the 4-day week could work for your organisation? Yes, 28%. 37% say no, Anne-Marie. 15% not sure. Okay, so we're going to see what we can make of that when we have our chat about that a little bit later. So we're going to be talking about how you know when it's the right time to implement workplace wellbeing in your organisation, how you choose what's right for your organisation, and whether the 4-day week could fit into that. And also how you create a kind of sustainable wellbeing strategy, and also measure the impact of what you're doing. So with no further ado, I'm going to ask, first of all, David to introduce yourself. Could you explain a little bit about who you are? Tell us a bit about Westfield Health as well, the size of the organisation, how many people you employ, makeup of the organisation, that kind of thing.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be joining you today. So I'm Dave Capper, the Chief Executive here at Westfield Health. We have just under 500 employees who work in 10 countries across EMEA. In the UK, we have a really strong and growing health insurance business, but we also support organisations of all sizes, from some of the most recognisable brands in the world through to sole traders around their corporate wellbeing approach and strategy. And so I'm fascinated, and just that data there just really does mirror some things that we've learned on our journey. So it'll be hopefully a great conversation to have this morning.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And Anne-Marie, can you do the same? Tell us a bit about yourself, what your role is, a bit about Atom Bank, size of the organisation.
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. My name's Anne-Marie. I'm the Chief People Officer at Atom. Atom is the UK's first, or was the UK's first app-only bank. There've been many more since, but we were the first off the blocks. We're based in Durham. Our team's now 500. We reached the 500 mark just last week. So in terms of those categories, we would have jumped a category. My role covers the entire people proposition. So right from attracting talent to creating a really inspiring working environment, including well-being, and making sure that people are developed along the way so they want to stay with us.
Fantastic. So it's a really all-encompassing role. And where were you before Atom Bank?
Most immediately, I was at Northern Power Grid, which is the electricity kind of infrastructure organisation in the northeast, in the north. But prior to that, I lived and worked in London for years for a company called ACCA.
Fantastic, thank you. So lots and lots of comments coming through, and I'm keeping a little eye on those as well as we come through. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, or if you're finding that it's not quite standing out enough, pop them in the Q&A, people, so that I can keep an eye out for them and feed them through as we're going along. Don't save all your questions to the last minute. Right, the first question I wanted to ask you, David, was when do you know that it's time to invest in the well-being of colleagues? Can you tell us a little bit about how you've approached this at Westfield Health?
Okay, no, absolutely. And I think the short answer, and then I'll go into our experience. The short answer is, from a personal view, yesterday. I think every organisation, absolutely, in terms of whatever you do, that belief that your people are your greatest asset, regardless of technology innovation that is here or will come in the future, the greatest asset is people. So how you can create a culture, the conditions for your people to be their happiest and healthiest, that will convert into productivity, into great employee satisfaction, etc. Westfield's journey, and probably like many on the call, probably if I go back 5-6 years, we were in a bit of a sticky wicket as an organisation. We had some difficult trading conditions. We had some wonderful assets, a wonderful institution over 104 years old, great people that worked at the business, but we lost our way a little bit. So probably we had a culture where we weren't that resilient to change. So the first thing for us as a leadership team, we knew that if we were going to help the business go through some transformation and change from a UK insurance company to a growing international corporate health and wellbeing provider, we needed to invest in our people. And our HR director penned a phrase which is stuck around. Our strategy is about driving business performance through wellbeing to our people. We believe that. We believe if we could create that culture, those conditions, make those decisions that balance really fairly and equitably our colleagues, our customers, our company, and our community, then over time we'll get more things right than wrong. So that was really important. And then, we'll come on to, but how you go about that journey, I think really does define you as the success of your strategy for sure.
And it's actually, we're often asked by people to kind of find case studies of corporates that will talk about how they've turned around workplace culture, for instance. And it's very hard to find people who will talk candidly about that. But in fact, it's a great success story that you've got. You went from being, I can't remember, you did mention to me where some investors and people
we were 680th in the league table. We were bang average, if I'm being honest with everybody, and everybody in the organisations lent into this programme, and we got to number one in our sector within 3 years. So it's a great story, but it never ends. It always iterates, it always changes, so.
And a lot of that has hinged on your approach to kind of putting well-being at the centre of everything, hasn't it?
100%.
You're walking the talk.
We've embedded our well-being of our people as a core component of our strategy.
Yeah.
And that's difficult because you've got to balance the commercial needs of the organisation, drive value for customers. It's a three-legged stool that's never even, is the truth. It's difficult, it's not easy, it's hard work. You have to be very intentional, but it's worth it. Yeah,
fantastic. And Anne-Marie, I'm going to come to you. Same sort of question. How do you know when it's time to invest in the well-being of colleagues? And I mean, has Atom Banks has kind of approached this with the people being at the centre of the organisation right from the beginning, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been around for 9 years. The company was founded 9 years ago, so relatively young compared to some of the other big banks and traditional in the sector. And we've been trading for 6. And I think, having that opportunity to start a business from scratch in the way that you want to, with people at the entire centre of what you do, inviting them into your organisation because of who they are and what they can bring, has been key to our success, I think. But when I think about well-being and designing that upfront kind of those well-being initiatives, you can kind of split it into 2 for me, in a sense of there are hygiene factors and elements that contribute to people's well-being. So fair pay and reward, interesting and challenging work. For me, they all contribute to well-being. We talk about it as employee engagement, but actually what's the output of that? People feeling good about themselves, and bringing their best selves to work. And then you have the more personal kind of side of well-being for me, in terms of, the day-to-day initiatives, the equality and diversity element, what you can help your people celebrate and how can they continue to contribute in that way to your business as well. So we've been able to do that right from the beginning. And I'm not saying that we get it right all of the time, but actually that holistic view in terms of what well-being is. We talk about employing extraordinary people to do extraordinary things at Atom. And I think that's really reflective of the business that we've created and what we want to drive. We would never have got a bank off the ground without having extraordinary people. And you have to look after them, right? And provide them with the right things that, will contribute to driving your business success, but also helping people feel really good about what they're doing and who they are.
Yeah, and actually it was that holistic approach that you take, rather than just having a series of initiatives that have been put in place to support well-being, that actually made you stand out from the different entries to the Make a Difference Awards. And that's one of the reasons why you were selected as the judges' winners.
Thank you.
Because actually it was really interesting to see how many people were doing fantastic things, but actually they were just a series of initiatives. And that's not really, it can work, but also really well-being has to be embedded within the organisation. And it's great to see 2 very different organisations, actually. One that's kind of retrofitted a culture based on wellbeing, and then one that started from scratch with wellbeing at the centre. So really interesting to see. There's a quick question here before we move on. Can't see the name of the person. Somebody liked the three-legged stool concept, Dave. Could you just clarify what the 3 legs represent, please?
Oh, now I'm going to really be contradictory. There's 4 legs to our stool, but there's 3 generally. But so Westfield, we have no shareholders, so I'll explain the 4th. So we exist to make a difference to the quality of life of our people, and we do that through reinvesting at least 1% of our group turnover back into community initiatives. So that's why I say the four C's. But so that's for us. But for the 3 C's is how, when you make business decisions, how can you take into account the impact of those decisions on your colleagues, on your customers, and on your company's health, in financial health and sustainability? And that's difficult because there's many companies on this call, we don't always make popular decisions as businesses or leaders. So to me, it's vitally important that the culture you create can help you become more resilient to those moments when things happen that are not ideal. Nobody gets into business to make difficult decisions. We want everything to go swimmingly well, but that's not normal life. So the 4 C's are just that conscience, that process, that framework, that when we make decisions, and one of the things I'm most proud of, my leadership team now, whenever they come up with new ideas, new things, I know that has got such great balance across those 4 C's, and we take that into consideration.
Fantastic. And just as one of your employees here has popped a note in, can I just say one of my sons works at, one of my sons works for Atom Bank, and they are an amazing company. So that's great. So no, that's really great introduction. Thank you for kind of giving a bit of context to our conversation. I think I wanted to move on a little bit and ask about how you've approached creating a sustainable workplace strategy. And actually, having chatted to you both in advance, there are similarities in the approach, and I think that's really going to come through strongly, and it's really important. So I'm going to come to you first though, Dave. What do you think, what is the most important thing when it comes to creating a sustainable workplace wellbeing strategy?
Yeah, so I think it's always about the how, not the what. A lot of people jump straight in, we don't have much money, what can we invest? The principles for us is, the first thing is listening. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to this subject. What works for Anne-Marie at Atom may not work at Westfield, and vice versa. So you have to acknowledge that there's no one-size-fits-all approach here. What's important, and that's because we're all human beings, we're all different cohorts of human beings, and we're all having different challenges or opportunities to overcome together. So understanding what matters most is really the start of the journey, and acceptance that the journey never ends. It just iterates and it changes. So you have to constantly keep asking the questions of what matters most, and refining and evaluating what you're doing to make sure it's driving value for everybody. And I think the main thing for me for sustainability is mirrored behaviours from top down.
Yeah.
Before everybody came on, Anne-Marie made a joke saying, great thing with the 4-day week, your leaders saying, what next? And it's that participation, that visible leadership that actually this matters. And this is part of what we do around here. Wellbeing, your wellbeing is important because it's important for you, your family, but it's also important for business performance too. Yeah. Healthier, happier people do work better. I think there's enough evidence out there now that shows that. So it's all about creating that culture, that leadership, visibility and consistency, but importantly, listening to what matters most to the people.
Yeah. And so can you give me an example of how do you actually kind of, you're the chief executive, do you kind of shut down your computer at a certain time and say, right, okay, I'm going to have some me time now, or family time, or whatever? It's hard. So, I find it hard.
It's super hard, but I think you're right. I'd be disingenuous to say the job's a 7-hour-a-day job all the time. But it's about understanding, managing your energy. I think when you talk about well-being, you've got to manage energy. You've got to respect rest and recovery, so you can perform at your best. So I think the people that work closest with me, they know that I'm obsessed with walking my dog. I have loads of walk and talk meetings. And they're the things that normalise that type of behaviour. How many people stick behind a laptop all day and have calls that they could be having when they're walking around? How can we create a culture where we respect rest and recovery as much as getting the job done, and it is a fine balance. But I think that they're hopefully the things that my colleagues would say.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that echoes some of what your thinking is, isn't it? Doesn't it, Anne-Marie? Do you want to chip in there? What do you think? What underpins a sustainable wellbeing strategy? I
Yes,
have
I
seen
mean, I was
some.
not.
I have seen some questions coming through, so I'll feed them through in a moment. Just
No, that's what I was nodding along as Dave was talking, because I absolutely agree with everything that he said there. And for me, it's around, really understanding what's important to your business, what's going to drive a successful business, and what is going to meet the needs of your people. And it's interesting, I think, when you do talk about well-being in that respect, because there are lots of individual needs. So, not every initiative, not everything that you implement is going to meet every single need. And I think it's important to try and maintain individuality where you can in that. And I often think it's an interesting conversation around, switching off emails and, everyone downtime at 6 o'clock or whatever time that might be. But that might actually cause more stress to some people who prefer to work at different times. So I think creating that culture of inclusivity where there are set standards and expectations around, if I work like this, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to, but this is our overall goal. And I saw a really nice kind of email footer just yesterday actually that said exactly that. I may email you at different times, but please don't feel obliged to respond to me immediately. And it was worded much nicer than that, much more eloquent.
Yeah, I've seen those as well.
Yeah, and I think whatever your initiatives are trying to meet as many individual needs as possible, and listening to your people. So I absolutely agree with everything that Dave has said, because in doing so it will give you business success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. And I've got a question coming through here. Do you do any pre-work to pre-assessment to determine what the needs are of your people? I think you definitely did, didn't you, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I mean, we stay close to our people through, and I think it's important to try and have lots of different communication channels as well. People like to contribute or are more comfortable contributing in different ways. So, over time, I mean, we've used, just surveys that we email out, focus groups, drop-in sessions with some of our exec members or senior managers, where people can come along and just share their thinking both ways. Pulse surveys, lots of different ways for people to contribute. And we have a people forum as well, which I think many organisations might. It's an informal group of people that represent the business that actually can act as a conduit for information and can translate some of what the business is trying to achieve into a way that actually is better understood sometimes. So I think having a range of channels that people can contribute and this two-way communication is vital, I think, in ensuring you're hearing as many voices as possible to create the best wellbeing strategy.
Yeah, so all of that pre-work is really essential, really, from your perspective.
Yeah, and ongoing as well, because I think it's testing, right, as you're designing and delivering things. So not just the pre-work, the actually, well, how are we doing? How is this landing with you?
Yes, yeah, brilliant. And what about you, Dave? Do you do kind of that sort of thing as well at Westfield Health? Have you?
Do we do what? Sorry, Claire?
Do you do kind of like a pre-work, kind of like, I know it's the listening, it's the sort of the assessment, it's sort of assessment what people's needs
the
are.
baseline, yeah. I was nodding. I've hurt my neck that much. I was nodding to Anne-Marie there, but yeah, that baseline assessment of understanding and just the point I'd add, because I think Anne-Marie's answer was spot on, is it's iterative. If you think about the pandemic, the first 6 months after the pandemic sort of started to die, the needs or worries of colleagues is very different then than it probably is today. So you've got to keep checking in. You've got to have an ongoing process, omni-channel approach, diverse views, and just that open-mindedness to keep refining and implementing new ways of working, really.
And actually, this all kind of leads really nicely into talking about the 4-day week, because actually it was part of this kind of pre-assessment work, wasn't it, Anne-Marie, that helped you to arrive at the kind of decision to start to trial the 4-day week. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How did that process work? And what were the messages that you were getting from your organisation for your employees that made you think a 4-day week could be the solution? Because actually nobody asked for the 4-day week, did they? as far as I understand it.
No one asked for the 4-day week, no. Yeah. But we were, I mean, throughout the pandemic, in all of the ways that I kind of listed earlier, staying close to our people to, to understand how they felt, how work was going for them, and, how they were being impacted by the effect of the pandemic. But we were also looking inside our organisation to say, we want to come out of this period as a much stronger, bigger, sustainable business that people are proud to work for. And I think it was in that vein and hearing the feedback from our people to say, I've never worked longer and harder. I'm spending more hours at my desk, my kitchen table, and yet I still never see my family. They're around me all the time. I don't get any good, valuable time. And actually, I'm putting in all of these hours. I don't feel like I'm achieving anymore. And actually, when we stood back from the organisation, we weren't necessarily seeing that translated through to huge business success. Don't get me wrong, we were doing absolutely fine. But I think in terms of thinking, well, where are the gaps here? So for us, it is around becoming, efficient and finding productivities within that, and meeting the needs of our people who wanted and were telling us that they value time more than anything. They value time and space with their people. And through a conversation with the chief exec, 4-day week, among other initiatives, were kind of banded around. So going off to do some research, some of you may have read, I'm sure you will have since, there are some really famous studies out there that were conducted in Iceland and New Zealand with a company called Perpetual Guardian. And if the research and data is to be believed, the implementation of a 4-day week where a person's hours is reduced for no reduction in pay actually has contributed to increased productivity and business success. And of course, employee well-being. People are feeling better about what they do. So, again, if the research and the data is to be believed, then why not try that within your organization? So worked on putting together a business case and doing some operational planning to see actually what would this mean for Atom, and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, what really I love about that is that actually you were listening to your people were talking about their well-being and their quality of life, weren't they? And it was that insight then that informed the decision to move forward with, well, actually this is about time having flexibility. This is actually about being more productive with the time that people have, and then that releases time for their own free time to spend time with their families or whatever they want to do. Absolutely. So I think it's absolutely brilliant. We've got loads of comments coming through here, and I'm keeping an eye on it, but I will come to some of those in a moment. But I just wanted to kind of just say to Anne-Marie, how does it actually kind of work in practice? Because I mean, lots of questions have been coming through here around, could you just clarify, do you work less hours for the same money, or how does it work?
Yeah, is it magic? No, it's not magic. It feels it when you implement it. We did take some time to plan, right? Or a fully regulated bank. So we have, requirements of our regulator, our customers. We didn't want to interrupt our customer experience in any way. In fact, we wanted to improve it, if anything. So there were things that, along the way in designing how we might implement this were non-negotiable. So regulation and compliance, this couldn't be affected. Customer experience, we weren't going to change our customer opening windows or experience. And actually, if we found that our employees weren't getting any benefit from it, that would be something for us to step back and say, this isn't perhaps for us. But I think the key in implementing something like this, and when we announced it to our people to say, we're thinking of doing this, guys, and the shock and disbelief and excitement and horror from some people to think, well, how is this going to work? The question that I was asked was, Anne-Marie, how are you going to design all of these shift patterns? I'm not a resource planner. I never have been. But I think this is key in terms of your people in the organisation do their jobs every day. They will know how to make this work. Finding efficiencies in your day every day enables you to release that time to spend on more personal things. But it also drives the bigger and better value add activities in the organisation. So we work with departmental heads in planning across their function. How would you run your operation, having reduced from 37.5 hours to 34? Again, no reduction in salary or pay. How would you continue to meet the needs of our business, and what risks might you see in that? And let us know how you might mitigate them as well. I also asked the functions to provide me with any material risk that they thought would, come out of actually moving to this kind of operating model. And not one material risk was identified. There were many risks, but which had been mitigated or had plans to mitigate. And I think that's been key in how we've implemented this, because people have been empowered to look over their day and their time to say, actually, where am I bringing value to this business? And where am I bringing value and enjoyment, I guess, in terms of my own role? And what's going to make this business and me succeed? Well, perhaps if I don't do this anymore. And I think that's been the key, in that we've handed it back to people to say, you help us make this work. You have the answers. And you know what? If it doesn't work, we'll go back to the drawing board. So it might not be 4-day a week, but it would be something else. And I always talk about, we own the drawing board. We can put whatever we want on the drawing board, Yeah. So if that wasn't going to be the solution, we would have worked to find something else that would have met our business aims and also, our employee feedback, the needs of our employees as well.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I think actually, we all understand, or mostly understand, that that sense of that locus of control, that sense of control of your workload, is a major factor when it comes to workplace well-being. People who have a sense of control over their workload can really, score higher when they say that they talk about their well-being in the workplace. So actually, what you're achieving is really fundamental to that as well. We've got lots of kind of questions that are a little bit specific to 4-day week, but I will actually just fire some of them at you now, Anne-Marie, if that's okay. And just it'd be good to get your opinion on them. Somebody said, have you told all your customers that you work a 4-day week, and your clients? And so they're not expecting people to be around on the 5th day, but that's not actually how it works, is it? You still work, is it 6 days a week, or?
So we operate, 7 days a week. So the branch is open for customers between 8 and 8. And we're open 365 days a year. Some of our teams work 24 hours. They cover. So some of our tech and service delivery teams are on call. So it was within that we absolutely were not going to interrupt service. So when we launched the pilot, we didn't directly communicate to customers necessarily in that we are going to change this, because they shouldn't have felt a difference. And actually, we'd done enough upfront planning to give us the confidence that that would be the case. When it came to suppliers and third parties, we did liaise with them in a sense of each function then talk to their suppliers to say, this is how my function is going to operate now. This is how we want to engage with you and communicate, so your service and our service doesn't drop. Right. So yes, that had to happen in terms of to ensure, certainly internally, that we could continue to provide the external customer service that we needed to. So obviously our customers will have heard about it in the news, because it was pretty big news at the time. I didn't expect it to be as big, I must say. So they will have heard about it, but we had no kind of feedback in any way that said, hold on a minute, you didn't tell us about this. Yeah. And in fact, one of the metrics, and I know we may talk about this later, we've tracked a number of metrics, and customer metrics have been key within that. Our Trustpilot score has never been higher. Our app rating scores have never been higher. So actually, whilst I'm always very careful to say 4-day a week has not directly caused that, I absolutely believe that it fundamentally has. So our customers have actually entirely benefited from a decision that we made, but that we thoroughly planned for.
Yeah, fantastic. So, and just 3 other sort of short questions here around the 4-day week. Does it apply to everybody, every employee? What happens if you've got lots of international people people working all over the world? Can it still work? And also, what if you've got lots of part-time workers?
Yes. So yes, it does apply to everybody. I did think in the pilot when we started, we would just limit it to a couple of departments, but actually in terms of ensuring service can continue across the business, we decided to push the button so everybody is included and has been from day one. We've had flexibility around that because we also understand that people have different responsibilities, parenting, caring, whatever it might be. So, we have worked on an individual basis with that as well to ensure that people could participate and still gain the benefit. Your second question, sorry, I knew this would happen. My brain
operates. So it's international. Lots of people. Somebody said they've got lots of international people working kind of in different parts of the world. You know, in different time zones. Can that still work?
Yeah, I mean, I can only comment. We're a UK-based organisation, so we've not yet expanded internationally. However, I think it comes from the planning. So if you're looking across departments to how you continue to work with stakeholders internally, what service are you providing? When are they on? When are they off? What is it that we need to do? So, you know, examples from, whilst not international, examples from my own business are, you know, the people team continue to operate 5 days a week. Some people have a Monday as a non-working day, some people have a Friday, but we provide a service across the team. So no one else in terms of our internal customers or candidates that may be coming to work for us would realise that. And I think you could do that on an international basis. You know, you could look to see, well, when it, you know, what are the time differences? What might we be able to do in structure so they still get that service from us? So I think it could be possible.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, so many questions coming through here as well. And part-time workers, it's possible to accommodate part-time as well. Somebody was asking, yeah.
Yeah, so part-time, the way we kind of work with part-time people, we had people in the past that had dropped to 4 days and had taken that salary reduction before we'd implemented the trial. And we gave people who were working part-time to actually pro-rata their time down in the same way as full-timers for the same pay, or to give the, you know, to have the time to be paid for that extra time. And again, that was giving it back to the individual to say, you know, whatever is important to you, you can benefit from the same way that full-time people can. So we gave that choice, and people, you know, it was different. We didn't have everybody saying, give me the money. You know, some people had said, I'd love to take that reduction in time again in the same way.
Yeah, okay, really interesting. So hopefully that's answered lots of the questions there and help to clarify. I mean, I think I think what's really interesting about it is that it actually just fundamentally puts well-being at the heart of everything that you're doing, because you're giving people control of their own, a sense of control, and you've actually listened to what they needed, which was more time, you know, the gift of time, and you know, a bit more boundary between work and life as well, which of course was so blurred during the pandemic, wasn't it?
And I think, you know, sorry, I just want to quickly add to that. And I think what's key in this is, I truly believe people want to work for successful organisations. People want to be proud and to be able to talk to their friends and family about who they work for. You know, and we'd said within our pilot, you know, we want to make this a success for our business. We want it to really help us achieve and be a bigger and better business. And if people are bought into that, they will absolutely work with you to find the solutions. So it's a win-win situation, I think, in terms of, you know, organisations saying, I'm not quite sure it'll work for us. Do you have all of the answers? The people who are saying that, I don't think they do. You know, I think putting it back to the business to figure that out, because we all want to be successful and we all want to work for brilliant organisations, I think.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But maybe 4-day week isn't for everybody, and there are a few people coming through saying it's not for us. We'd like to, you know, hear about other things as well. So, but just what do you think, Dave, about the 4-day week? What are your thoughts about it? Do you think it could work?
I think it's fantastic that Anne-Marie and Atom have been relatively first movers on this. I predict that as more information comes out and evidence around business performance is actually improved, you know, so there's no compromise to that. You look at the questions, there's definitely a curiosity in the questions around 4-day week. So there's something there with it. I think what's coming out of this, though, for me is you are, and you said it, Claire, you're putting wellbeing at the heart of the story here. You're showing, the organisation showing that actually we care about the business being high performing and sustainable, because we all need that, we all want that. But we're also respecting, we want you to be happy, healthy in yourselves. How you achieve that, I think it doesn't really matter. That 4-day week will be asked for some companies. It's that ability to embed in your DNA a piece around. I know some of our colleagues, they really love the flexibility around school drop off and pick up. Now, I'm sure that can still happen in the 4-day week. I'm sure that's still part of the thing, but they're the things that really matter to people, you know. So I think it's a fantastic conversation. I'm super curious. Definitely, I've said, Anne-Marie, I'll come and meet you in a few weeks' time, and we'll keep learning and discussing it for sure.
Yeah, and I think the thing also that actually is transferable across other approaches to wellbeing, even if you can't implement the full day week, is that what you've done is that you've asked the line managers to get involved with all of this. So, I mean, the line managers are absolutely crucial, aren't they, to embedding workplace wellbeing across the organisation. And you kind of make it as individual as possible just by the very nature of the 4 day of kind of your approach to the 4 day week. It's not about saying everybody works like Monday to Thursday. It couldn't be more personalized, could it? Because all
Yeah.
of the line managers have had to speak with all of their team members to find out how to make it work for them and how to mitigate any risk.
Yeah, and I think, it is important to say, however, in each function that, they make it work for the department as well. So, if, for example, I gave the example of the people team, we're a support function. It's slightly easier for us to do a Monday or Fridays, non-working days. But in our operational teams, there'll be some people that take a Tuesday or some people that take a Thursday. Now, some of that will be dictated or driven by the business need, but there'll be flexibility in that along the way to say, you may do this for the next 6 months or 12 months, and then you have the opportunity to change it. So there's a balance, right, in terms of different departments and functions. Yeah. But absolutely, people have told us and talked to their leaders and managers around what will best work for them.
Yeah. And this is really what comes through is this actual commitment to your people actually is fundamental to making it work, isn't it? There's a question that came through ages ago, and this feels like it's the right time to ask it. How important is upskilling people managers around soft skills, do you think? How important do you do that? Do you upskill people managers around soft skills like empathy and compassion, for instance?
Absolutely, I'm sure. I mean, yes, I think it's vitally important, especially as you empower teams and people to come up with some of their own outcomes and solutions to challenges that we face. We learn a lot. I think the pandemic was a fantastic learning opportunity for all businesses. I was criticised at the time, so we didn't say this is what we want you to do. We said let's work this out together, because each teams are different. We're international business. Some of our international employees have got different expectations because they work within large corporates. So there's no one size fits all approach again. And yes, the role of managers in that either made the situation fantastic or more difficult. Yeah. So you don't need to get upset about that. Let's learn from that. And how can we keep evolving, iterating, training? Because the role of a manager in the well-being of a workforce, I think, is huge.
Yeah. Absolutely. And all of this, somebody asked kind of the question, how do you embed workplace wellbeing? In fact, everything that we're talking about throughout this webinar is about embedding workplace wellbeing. So it's about listening to your people. It's about trying to make sure that the initiatives are as personalized as possible. It's about making sure that you're empowering people to have a sense of control over their own destiny, and that you're training managers. It's all of these things together. What would you say, Anne-Marie? How important is the training of managers in soft skills and what you're doing at Atom Bank?
Yeah, absolutely vital. We call managers coaches at Atom, and we did that very purposefully at the beginning because we wanted to kind of convey that we want people to have a different kind of conversation. This isn't about constantly giving direction, it's about listening and helping somebody realize their potential and while supporting them in their work. So we call them coaches, and we have a leadership and coaching kind of framework with development that is provided for all coaches in the business, and that ranges from the practicalities of working with people and helping structure objectives to actually the well-being and personal focus in terms of working with people. So we expect all of our coaches to go through that journey, and in doing so they create networks for themselves and supporting each other while supporting the teams in the business. But I think it is really important that you and we as businesses equip people to have good conversations, but actually more importantly to ask good questions
and to listen to the answers.
And to listen to the answers. And for this to become part of everyday conversation, it doesn't need to be a coaching conversation or a one-to-one where you sit down once a month. It could be when you're boiling the kettle in the kitchen, or when you're passing someone in the corridor. So I think it's about framing questions and reframing conversations in the business that will help unlock other really important elements of well-being, actually.
Yeah, and they don't actually have to be well-being conversations either, do they?
No, no, not at
They don't
all.
have to be centered around that. It's just the more open everybody can be and feel safe. This is where the psychological safety comes into it, that they feel safe, they can have these coaching conversations openly, then that supports well-being just as a byproduct, really.
Yeah, I think the ability to bring yourself to work, you know, you hear it quite a lot now, bring your whole self to work. You know, there's a challenge to that, right? I'm definitely not Anne-Marie that I am on a Saturday night than I am on a Wednesday afternoon. But, you know, I think it's that sense of being really, truly who you are. And I think when you invite people into your organization, being, you know, really reminding them of that's why you're here, because we think you are bringing something brilliant to our business and will help you be you in helping us. And I think it's that really that can support well-being.
Yeah, fantastic. We are going to be talking a bit about sort of how you measure impact, and I know there's been a question about that as well in the chat. But before we do that, I wanted to address another question that's come up in the chat actually, which was what are some of the key challenges that you've come up against? We didn't prepare for this, so I'm going to put you on the spot. When it comes to sort of rolling out well-being and implementing well-being, what are some of the challenges, Dave, do you think that you've come up across? And how
This is a complex subject, so there's no point sitting here saying it's easy. It's really difficult. Again, there's no end point. There's definitely a start point. So I've seen some comments here around, you know, remote workforces now, geographically dispersed, more hybrid working. You know, those you have to work harder to create those connections. Those human connections are really important to maintain culture. It's not impossible. It's just different. So how, you know, so understanding how you can engage with geographically dispersed or disconnected people to create a sense of belonging and that psychological safety. I think it's a challenge.
Yeah.
I say it starts, you know, my HRD always says to me, Vicky, beware of your shadow, because we're human beings, we all make mistakes. Leaders, you know, so leaders and managers are both a great cause of great outcomes for corporate well-being. They can also create issues, and we all do. Let's be honest, we'll all do the wrong things sometimes. But it's creating that you mentioned it, Claire, psychological safety, so we can just let each other off the hook a bit more and just have a conversation and learn from it, so we can go forward and move together. Culture is massive for me, and that's the thing, that it never ends and it always changes, because things happen around us, aren't they, as well? It's not just what's happening in our businesses. They're the challenges.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. Can you share any challenges, Anne-Marie? People are always reluctant to talk about their challenges, but
no, I think, you know, exactly that. Totally agree with Dave as well. And I think it is creating that environment where people can give you that feedback, but I think being open to what can be seen as quite difficult messages sometimes. Well, this isn't working and it's not planned as how it would have been. But I think it's how you respond to that and how you work with people in working through the challenges. So if I think of a challenge from 4 day a week, I think, you know, initially when we even made the announcement, there were a number of people that said this absolutely will not work. It's what are you doing? What are you even possibly thinking about? You know, and I think working with people through that change cycle, actually, in terms of it's an emotional roller coaster as much as it is a practical and planning one. So I think, you know, really being sympathetic, open to the needs and feedback of people, and working with them to get to the right solution. You know, I knew that 4 day week was never going to be an overnight success. You know, we're unwinding over 100 years of 5 day week working, you know, even more, I think it's 130, 140 years of working in that way. But I think, you know, being open with your people in whatever wellbeing initiative that you're working through to say, let's give this a go. Let's give it a go. We think it could work. And if it doesn't, let's go back to the drawing board. So, you know, facing challenges head on and working with them, I think, is really important.
Yeah. And I guess the message is that challenges can be overcome, can't they? You know, that, like you're saying, implementing and embedding well-being across the organization is challenging. It's not a no-brainer. You do have to be very, very persistent from what I understand, but it's about us kind of acknowledging what those challenges are and then working around them. And I think that's kind of the message that you're conveying as well, isn't it? So a comment here from Matt: building strong, trusting relationships with your people as a foundation will naturally open usually closed doors when it comes to private and difficult conversations. Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about. But even that isn't that easy. So we do acknowledge that. I think we wanted to talk a little bit. Somebody put a question here. How do you measure the success of the wellbeing initiatives? Or we could talk about 4-day week as well in that. Is it from pulse surveys mentioned, or do you do anything else to measure? And I think I'll come to you, Anne-Marie, first. Can you talk a bit about sort of how you've measured the tangible impact that a proactive approach to workplace wellbeing is having?
Yeah, I think your people KPIs, your key performance indicators across things like attrition, how many people are leaving your organisation, sickness levels, overtime levels, right across the suite. The performance in those will tell you exactly how your organisation is feeling generally, your engagement score. And when we implemented 4-day week, we also asked departments to outline what their productivity measures were that were very specific to the work that they were doing. And so they could test the efficiencies and the success of what we were doing as well, but from a business and a practical perspective, supporting people when perhaps things weren't kind of happening or weren't going as well as we thought they would. And then also staying in touch with people. So, all of the channels that we've talked about earlier, staying close to people with very specific and crafted questions around, how is this going for you? I guess the other measure for me, lastly that I'll talk about is, and it's the one that's most pleasing to me in that I have no control over it, and it is, it's what people say about us externally. It's what our people talk about us, and exactly, there's a really lovely comment earlier on as well, people who are proud to talk about us as a business, that post things on their social media, that will tell their friends and family, and that will tag us in it as well. And I think you can't get a better measure than that, in the sense of how it is actually impacting someone's well-being. If they want to shout from the rooftops about it, I think they're probably feeling pretty well and they're pretty engaged with their organisation. So I think that metric is one of the most pleasing to me. Although we don't track it necessarily, it's really nice to see and hear, and it just reinforces what we're doing is actually paying off.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think it's, people often ask about measuring the impact of wellbeing initiatives, and it sounds like actually, because you've set about this thinking about the business objective, and you're able to measure business outcomes linked to all of the initiatives that you've put in place, that's perhaps what sets you apart a little bit from some of the other employers out there who are just putting in place piecemeal initiatives that are then quite hard to measure impact because it's not part of a much wider business strategy. And again, this is actually what set you apart in the awards, because we did ask for people to show us how that they were measuring impact, and it's very difficult to do that if it's not part of an overarching strategy.
Yeah.
But what would you add, Dave, to that? How do you approach measurement? And
again, we work with hundreds and hundreds of organisations on this subject. So, and what I can say is there's no one size fits all approach. What matters most to one organisation, and what I will say is a shift away from a return on investment. That's been historically, that's always been what does it pay? If I invest £1 in wellbeing, and I think what you've heard from Anne-Marie today is it's a more broader suite of measures here that's about value. It's about value to the business. We want the business to be a great performing organisation, but we want to invest in our people. So the qualitative stuff's really important. None of us can say as businesses that we won't make changes that are not popular. But what we can control is that when we make those changes, nobody makes changes better than us. That we show compassion, humility, respect in that process at every step. They're the things that can define us. And I think that to me is that's embedded well-being within a culture of an organisation. So it's to me the qualitative stuff, how people feel, that view of what they say about what it feels like to work here. And when it's not so good, that's a great learning opportunity. Instead of being miffed about it or upset, no, how can we turn that into a positive? I think is really important. What I will say, if I can, just very quickly,
go for it.
I say this because I hate, it's a personal view, and I probably on a webinar with hundreds of people as Chief Executive of Westfield Health, I want the narrative to go away. This should just be a thing that we all want to do. It doesn't matter about the investment really, because it's not all about investment. It's about behaviour, culture, leadership. And when I left school, I was a professional footballer for nearly 5 years. And if, forget football, if it's elite sport, if you've got two teams of equal skill and ability, but one team has got fractured relationships, totally clicks, disconnect, they've got some health issues that they're carrying injuries, versus another team with the same skill who've got a real bond, a real connection, real trust within that team. They're actually at their peak performance of health because they're having a bit of luck, or they're staying on top of that, and their mental health and fitness is really strong. Who are you going to back to win? And I think in sport, and we all would, I don't bet, but if I did bet, you'd bet on the team that's together, that's healthy, that's happy. But we don't really translate that to the workplace. We want a business case. Yeah. And I just think it's common sense and intuition. We spend so much time at work, less time at Atom now than Westfield, it seems. But we spend a lot of time at work. We've got a duty to make that time as happy and as healthy as it can be. And it can't always be happy and healthy, but that's how we can measure the edge cases, really.
And fantastic. We've got a few comments coming through here. We measure employee wellbeing experience and provide each employee, team and company with a wellbeing score. When wellbeing improves, their score improves. It's interesting. Always interested to see different things people are doing, because this space is really moving fast and evolving quickly, and it's all about being brave and innovating, isn't it, really? Somebody else has said, we find return on expectations or experience, ROE, is often better than ROI. Class insight, Dave. And lots and lots of different comments coming through, which is fantastic to see. We've covered a huge amount today, and I just want to kind of wrap up, because somebody did put a question in around the embedding workplace wellbeing. We've talked a lot about that. Really, everything that we've covered has been about embedding workplace wellbeing across the organisation, because that's actually what we're all about at Make a Difference. What would you say, if you would kind of to sum up, sorry to put you on the spot a little bit, both of you, Anne-Marie and Dave, if you 3 tips to embed, to summarise, how do you embed workplace wellbeing across the organisation? Who'd like to go first?
3 tips, put us on the spot.
3 words.
Yeah, no, so just summarise.
3 words. I will say listen.
Yeah.
Implement, learn, and just keep going. Just keep going through that loop around it. And I will say, I can't remember the stat, Claire, at the start. I think the biggest proportion of attendees was small businesses.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I think it can feel a lot more daunting if you're a small business, because this is about a process. It is about a process of data capture, analysing that data, making decisions, learning from what happens, listening and going through that process. And what I will say, there's a lot more product design now around that process. So, because people haven't got the time to think about this and do it. So there are products out there from reputable companies,
such as Westfield Health, for instance.
Westfield Health, for instance. No, but where we've been very intentional about supporting, especially small businesses that just haven't got the bandwidth to do the research and do the work. We can baseline, we can iterate, we can implement, we can learn, and we can do that for you. So I think that's a big challenge for small businesses in particular that we want to help solve. Yeah,
fantastic. And we really also want to bring more small businesses into these conversations, because it shouldn't only be for large corporates. And Anne-Marie, can you just 3 words or 3 tips? What's the essence of embedding workplace wellbeing into your organisation?
Yeah, I think I really again agreed with what Dave said earlier, in terms of it's what organizations should be doing, but it's the right thing to do. And I think communicating that to your people and demonstrating that it is the right thing to do and you absolutely believe in it is key. I think, talking about it, involving people in making things happen, involving people in the co-creation of anything really that is to do with, improving and enhancing well-being in organizations. Don't assume that as leaders that you have all of the answers. You don't need to have all of the answers. You need to have a level of vulnerability to be able to go out and ask for the answers. And actually what you can co-create with the brilliant, extraordinary people that you've brought into your organization will actually pay dividends. So I agree with Dave. It's the right thing to do. Your leadership team should convey that and involve your people in creating the right things for your organization.
Fantastic. There've been loads more questions, and I may pass them. I'll pass some of them on to you. Some of them were a little bit more specific, such as kind of, can you tell us more about the community initiatives that you have, Dave, and that sort of thing. So perhaps we can follow up with that, directly to the person that asked the question. That is another kind of webinar, actually, because actually this is the next step. Once you've embedded workplace wellbeing, it's looking at the impact that you can have on your communities as well around you, kind of the ripple effect that can have. So amazing. Thank you so much for your energy and your passion, and for your time and sharing your knowledge, Dave and Anne-Marie. Thank you. Amazing audience. I love our audiences. You just bowl me over every single webinar that we do. So thank you so much. And we will have a look through the chat and have a look at if there are any specific questions we can get to that we didn't address, we will do. Lots and lots of thanks coming through. Wonderful insights. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent session. Thank you all. Thank you. Interesting. Thank you. Inspiring. So I think that we get a thumbs up. We've managed to make an impact in an hour. So thank you so much, Dave and Anne-Marie. Thank you so much, Westfield Health, for sponsoring the webinar and making it possible, and for being such tremendous advocates for this topic, and for walking the talk, even more importantly. We look forward to welcoming you all to another Make a Difference webinar very soon. Thank you, everybody. Bye.